Yeah, it's just like I hate it. Like my overall plan is, to have more cameras in more places. 24/7 surveillance is what I
Yeah,
like to s- what I would like to see of everyone,
yeah. That's
So,
yeah. I brought that subject up at work, and I was kind of debating with people at work and everything. And I was arguing from your point of view, and I really I can't find a good argument against it. Like I really can't. I haven't been able to reconcile it. Like I
mhm.
don't want it to happen. Like as a uh, I don't know, like strictly from like a I don't know, like a selfish reasons, I guess, and everything. I personally I don't think that's necessary, and I don't want that. I like the more like individual freedom type of stuff. But at the same time, like you're, I mean, as long as you're doing everything fine, you're not doing anything illegal, you're not breaking any rules or whatever, then why would anybody care? But
Yeah.
I don't know. And yeah, and I think okay, well, discussing it with several people, I think the biggest arguments against it, one was like just a logistical one about like how the hell do you have a camera watching somebody at all times and everything. But I mean, eventually technology could catch up to that. So
Right,
that's a
right.
yeah, that's an okay argument for now. But 20 years from now, like who's to say that it's not possible? Um, but the other argument was basically like public perception of certain things. It may not be illegal, but like okay, let's say you're running for office or something like that, and people will go back into your past as far as they can and pick out teeny tiny little things and say like, oh, look at what they did here, whatever, and they can, I don't know, public perception of a certain action can be, I don't know, seen as morally bad when it necessarily it's not.
Mhm.
And then that person could lose the election or whatever over something innocuous that is kind of skewed a certain way. um, but yeah, I mean, there's even instances of people like having conversations like this, saying something, candidly or whatever, or even what was it? Like you've heard of PewDiePie, right? On
Yeah, yeah, I heard of him.
and the Wall Street Journal and all that stuff and everything. Like, yeah, Disney like canceled a contract with him and everything, and like I don't know, it that doesn't seem right that somebody can put out an article and skew it a certain way, and then I don't know, and it's not just him losing money and losing projects and stuff, but it's everybody that's worked on those projects, all based on like a stupid public perception that was like taking a part of a video out of context and saying that he supports Nazis and stuff, and it's I don't know. I
Mhm.
think that's my biggest problem with it, and that deep down I do feel like privacy should be a like a human right. You should have some level of privacy, but logically I can't necessarily defend that as just like a human right. I just deep down I think that's what my opinion is.
All
I
right.
think that it
So, let me see. So with PewDiePie,
yeah
I heard something about the overall story of what happened.
yeah
Uh, I didn't, and I know that he was claiming he was taken out of context, and I saw some evidence of that the newspaper, they took stuff out of context and whatever.
yeah
Um, so it's like he was trying to demonstrate an example of what would be taken out of context, and then they went ahead and took that out of context.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
so
most
I've heard
ironic
about
thing.
that. Right.
Yeah,
Um, but in that case, all he would have to do is go back to the video itself and show that they actually took it out of context. And in fact, I believe basically, in order for certain kinds of conversations to happen, uh, in order to in order to achieve my goals during using logical debate and all of that, I've come to the
hmm
I hold the view that it is possible to scientifically prove that something was taken out of context or that something is in context. All
okay,
right. So then it means that I have to come up with this whole structure of science. Scientifically, I need to be able to show that this is what counts as being in context, and this is what counts as not being in context. You know? So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to have to work out all of these details to show exactly what kind of evidence counts in each case.
Mhm.
What counts as scientific proof that something was taken out of context, and that's going to be, a hard discussion to have that so
Yeah,
far
yeah.
no one has been able to have with me.
Uh,
And so in like that situation with PewDiePie, I mean, surely he would be able to show the few seconds preceding those clips, and then the few seconds
yeah,
after that, and
yeah,
that
and that's what he's done. And a
right.
lot of people have kind of like come to his, his side and everything. But I know that there are some people that just saw the Wall Street Journal and they're like, oh, well, PewDiePie's a racist now or whatever. And so or he's a Nazi and blah, blah, blah. And so they, I don't know, unsubscribe, whatever. But that, like, I mean, it's not really going to hurt him because I think out of like the 50 million subscribers that he has, like he's good. Like most of his viewers and everything know what he's about and know his stuff, and they know that he's not um, a Nazi white supremacist or whatever.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It's just the fact that like a newspaper can put forward something dishonest, and people will only see that. And I mean, you can't force everybody to go out and like check all of the facts and everything. But I don't know. It's really
Okay, okay.
dishonest.
So then the issue is the readership, the reach of the newspaper being more influential than his channel or something. So yeah, that has a lot to do with the current situation that he's in. Um, like when you're talking about strat, let me just lay it out again so that just to refresh your memory, maybe
Okay.
that my when I'm talking about logical debate, I'm thinking of there being there are three subcategories of logical debate. Okay, so there are the debates about scientific issues. There's scientific debate, and then there's moral debate about moral issues, and then there's strategic debate about what's the best way to achieve a person's goals given uh, given the situation that that person is in, and then you're trying
Okay.
to maximize some certain efficiency or some kind of outcome, reach some kind of
Yeah.
outcome while minimizing the harms and all of that. Okay,
Yeah. Whatever parameters you set.
right, right. So I see those as three separate types of debate, and so when it comes to PewDiePie, the issue
Mhm.
would be like, how can he wants to make a send out a certain message, but he wants to do it in a way that minimizes the amount of, let me see. So there's with the situation he's in, the newspapers are able to take him out of context in a way that he cannot overcome very easily. Right? So that's the constraint on his situation, that the newspapers have some kind of reach that he is not able to compensate for. Uh,
It is a. It is a morally bad action starting from their part because they know that they're taking that out of context. Like
wait,
there's
wait a
no.
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Okay, first of all, is it morally bad for a person to act hypocritically?
That was another thing I wanted to bring up and everything. I would agree yes and everything, but I had a separate question. We
Uh
can
huh.
get into that later.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah, I would
Okay.
say yes.
Yeah, because yeah, that's what I believe. And so,
Yeah.
so now, oh, what was your other question? What are you going to talk about?
Um. So it. So it starts off with initially a bad action, and if everybody thought through all of their actions, perfectly and everything or whatever. Like, of course, this whole situation wouldn't happen, but I guess, okay, in relation to the privacy and full 24-hour surveillance of everybody argument, I think that people can skew something or skew an action that is innocuous, but it can be presented in a way that the public will, deem this horrible, or you're a deplorable whatever. And I believe that that's not right. And I feel that if you if you eliminate privacy, you open that up to so many more other avenues and unintended consequences and stuff like that. I mean, you would have to have a system like your logical debate and everything else to where, like, okay, no, like, this doesn't make sense to do and everything. And if everybody kind of governed themselves that way, then yeah, stuff like that probably wouldn't happen. But just to say, like, okay, if tomorrow we had 24-hour surveillance, I think it would be anarchy. As far as, like, I mean, it would be a rough couple months.
Okay, so the way I see it, if there's 24/7 surveillance of everyone, then you could be able to see when a person is clipping a video and taking it out of context. And you would be able to see the hackers actually hacking into computers and stuff like that if it was of everyone. Okay, so I think the more cameras there are of everyone, the better. And that would solve that problem. Now, if you're talking about how if there's only a few people who have cameras on them, and then the people who are off camera can then, try to secretly take things out of, edit videos and take things out of context, then yeah, that's a possibility. But again, I would just say that you could just refer back to the original video. You could, like I said,
Okay.
I believe it's possible. I believe it's possible to scientifically prove that a person took something out of context in a
Okay,
very
yeah,
specific
agreed.
sense, okay? And so you would be able to scientifically prove that that happened, and that
Okay,
would then be the issue. Now,
okay,
I understand that you're concerned that with the timing and the power imbalance between the ones who make the original video and the people who take it out of context. Like there are Twitter people who, have a bigger following, and so your reputation might be ruined unfairly and stuff like that. Yeah, we could work through that. I think that's a solvable. I don't think that should be a reason against 24/7 surveillance eventually. You know?
yeah. I'm not saying it's the strongest argument or anything, but I just think that there's unintended consequences that go in with it, and I think that. And okay, and again, I mean, this could go into the logistical argument and everything, but you see, basically, two people can watch a video and take different things from it.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have a lot of the police shootings and everything. Like, one person from their perspective will look at it and say, like, okay, yeah, obviously this person did it out of spite. They're a racist. That cop needs to be in jail. And then someone else could watch the video and say, like, no, he was completely, within his right to do that. So but I think that lends itself to the logistical argument, because you would have to have a perfect system. It would have to be, multiple angles showing every keystroke they do on a computer and showing their screen. And I don't know, it would have to be a perfect system. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you would eventually want to see the keystrokes in the screen. Now, when it comes to the police video, like, if you can show a video and
mhm.
to two people and they have different interpretation of it, I mean, part of it would be subjective. Okay, so
Yeah.
part of the things that they would differ on would be subjective things that they cannot scientifically prove. Now, if there are things that, if they differ on issues that they can scientifically prove, then that would be a healthy kind of debate to have. All right, so like when the police shoot someone, the issue that two people might differ on is did that cop feel fear for his life? Did he fear for his life? Okay. Now, I would say that it's not possible to scientifically prove that a person is feeling fear.
Agreed.
Okay, and so right there, that would take that right out of the equation, and so you would have to go simply by what was captured on camera specifically. Like, did the suspect make some kind of some type of movement that fits into a category that we could say then justifies the police shooting the person?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
we
I
could,
think that's a real slippery slope though. But yeah, I don't know. Because I mean, what if they're, you asked him in the, what is it, Philando Castile case and
yeah,
everything, like he asked him to or grab for the insurance or whatever. Can you get your insurance? He's like, oh, I have a gun, and then he's like going for the
uh
insurance. I
huh.
mean, technically we don't 100% know, but I mean, watching the video, like I can see it from the perspective of the cop as like, okay, well he's saying like, well, don't grab it, but maybe he meant to say don't grab the gun or just stop moving, but he said don't grab it, and then he's like I'm not, and he was potentially still moving or going for the insurance or something, and then he takes out his gun and shoots him. But I don't know. I can.
Yeah.
Are you like the complete opposite on that? You think that it's
Uh,
completely unjustified, or
I'm thinking that in that case, um,
I think my theory is just that it's like a miscommunication. He was saying don't grab it, and by it he meant the gun, and the guy said okay I'm not, but he's still moving or still like reaching for something we can't really see in the
well,
car,
if
but
he, well, it could be that the police officer was saying don't grab your license or whatever, right?
yeah, either way, but he kept moving, and it's like okay you just told him that you have a gun and then you're moving and everything. I mean
And
he
and
doesn't
then
know if this guy's crazy or whatever, so it's
and then right before that, didn't he tell him to get something though? I,
yeah, he asked like, "Oh, can you get your license and registration?" And then he says, "Oh, I just want to let you know that I do have a firearm." And then he's like, "Okay, well, don't grab it." And he's like, "I'm not." He's like, "Don't grab it. Don't." And he keeps repeating like, "Don't grab it. Don't grab it," and everything. So I'm assuming with that interaction, he's moving, and I think he's moving slightly, maybe for the glove box, for the insurance, or whatever. And cop misinterprets that as he's going to grab the gun, and I don't know, but he's still moving. I'm telling him to stop moving and not to grab it and everything, but he's continuing to move.
okay, so you think it was just a miscommunication?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean it's like I was. What I would say is like I, I'm basically going to be taking the fear issue out of it. It's like we can't have laws that are based on did the cop
okay,
feel fear. All right,
okay. Is
so then it's
that what
gonna.
you?
What I would say is we need to change the way the laws are worded, so that we strip the emotions, we strip out the unprovable aspects.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
So
yeah,
what's your opinion on that, though?
yeah. I don't feel any. I don't think it was like an intentional thing or anything. Uh, yeah, I don't really. It's just surprising that the jury acquitted him. Yeah, that is surprising because yeah, because of the video. The video seems like he should be charged with something. He should be guilty of something. But again, because of the way the law is worded, yeah, they have to. Yeah, yeah. It seems like cops are able to claim that they felt fear, and then the jury is instructed to determine if they felt fear. And so once you've said, yeah, I think maybe he felt fear, but it was illogical for him to feel fear in that situation, you still have to acquit. That's how I think the system works right now.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
I mean, at the same time, I mean, they're like cops are putting themselves in harm's way. So I do feel that like whenever they do get into a situation with any sort of citizen, they should have complete control of the situation. Because if at any point they don't have control or they feel that they don't, that could potentially end in their death. So it for them to feel secure and and okay, I understand what's happening. Everybody's doing what I'm asking them to do. Like okay, like but at the same time, like I do see the concerns of like, well, what about the cops that abuse that? And I don't know. That's a whole like I'm completely for if yeah you
yeah,
find yeah any wrongdoing should 100% be prosecuted and everything. But yeah, it is by defining it on fear and fear alone. That yeah, it's completely subjective. And agree, there should be some sort of more concrete definition of or way to look at these incidents.
Yeah, so, and I was thinking, like, the police are putting themselves in harm's way, and it's like they chose that. They said that they would, they're willing to put themselves in that kind of situation voluntarily, right? And so they should be able to calmly, well, never mind. The point is that the laws are going to have to change first, I think. So, yeah, I basically want to set it up so that, we.
I mean, what's the alternative though? I mean, how else can you define that? What can you scientifically prove in that situation?
Well, it depends. Well, you can scientifically prove what a person uttered. You can prove what motions a person made. Uh, now, when it comes to that fear again, is the cop is the cop of? Okay, so first of all, let me go back and say that I haven't really had any bad interactions with the cops. I never felt I've been discriminated against in any situation, really. Uh, yeah, so I've grown up my own entire life thinking, we've reached color blindness, basically. All right, it's just I thought that the people who complain about these kinds of issues are basically, to some degree, they're just joking. It's not really a big issue anymore in the '90s or in the 2000s. That's how I felt about it. It's more like like in the movies, they have characters that make fun of certain things, and it's just to get a laugh, and people are joking, and so yeah, I never really thought that there was large scale discrimination happening. All right, so that's basically where I come from on this, and so seeing that there are so many people that are still paranoid about these, I think it's more of a they're seeing things and assuming that it's some kind of discrimination or racism, and I always dismiss it. I've always dismissed it, but in order to get these people to see things more my way, I've been trying to think about how to calm their concerns and all of that. Uh, and yeah, so let me say, the only interactions I've had with the police is when, like, in the past couple years, I've been on my way to work. Um, I've met, so I would take a shortcut through the train tracks, right? And technically, it's a no trespassing zone. And so a couple of times, police have been there looking for homeless people, trying to get them to move away. All
Okay.
right, so the first time, I was walking there, and the policeman stopped me. He said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to work. And he said, where do you work? And I said, further down at the FedEx. He said, do you have proof of employment there? And I said, yes. And I was, let me see. Yeah, he asked if I had my ID or something like that. And I was like, yeah. And so I was going for my ID. And so I reached, let me see. I reached into my pocket, my bag to get my wallet and show my ID. And he was like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And I said, you want my ID, right? And he was like, yeah. And so then he let me get it and show it to him. All right. So after that, I realized for the first time, holy crap! He asked me for my ID, and then he was surprised that I was going for it. I didn't realize that they were that strung up. How could you?
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time,
No,
like,
yeah, but
okay,
it's like if they thought that I might be armed or something. Why don't they should have told me? I had no idea that they thought I might be a dangerous person or armed. It's like if they were looking for an armed suspect, you know, that would be one thing. And I would want to know ahead of time so that I
Yeah,
could
but it's not always an
announce.
armed suspect, though. Like, okay, it could be some homeless person, whatever, just walking along the train tracks and has a weapon in their bag and everything, and then they ask, like, "Oh, do you have proof of employment?" If you as the crazy person there, like the ideal time to take out a weapon and shoot the cop and everything would be after they ask you for your ID. You're like, "Okay, yeah, I'll
Really?
grab it," and then boom. Well,
Really?
I mean,
Because
if
wouldn't the
you had
ideal time be? I never thought of it that way. I never. It was like, so if you have a weapon that you could use, what you're saying is that the strategically good thing to do is to pretend you don't have a weapon until the police asks for your ID.
I mean,
It's like
if
if you
your
wanted
intention
to
is,
if you wanted to hurt the police, why
yeah,
wouldn't you
yeah.
pull it out at the first moment that uh, that you thought they weren't looking or something? I don't know. It just seemed I never.
I guess maybe, but I just either way, like I think cops, anytime they see you reaching for a bag or whatever, it literally any single time that you do that,
Even when
it
they
could
tell you.
be, yeah. Even when they tell you, they'll say do it slowly or something like that. Because if you're like just, I mean, and your reaction was completely justified as well. That's a normal reaction. That's how normal people like, oh yeah, yeah, I'll grab it right here and everything. And I don't know if you want to be, you're on your way to work or whatever, so you do kind of want to be quick about it. So you're kind of like, I mean, it's I would say rather than have a changing the laws and stuff like that, like if you could have something more scientifically provable in those situations and everything, I'm 100% for body cams and everything else, like those I'm completely for. But rather than changing the law, I think there should be a protocol that cops are obviously, they have a certain protocol of how they're supposed to go about interactions with citizens, but citizens as well should have a protocol as like on top of that,
Uh-huh.
and they should know the exact interactions that they need to do, and that way there's no situations like yours where you're like, oh yeah, I'll grab it right here, which is a normal thing to do, but to a cop that's potentially a very threatening motion. So I think that there should be a protocol to where you're like, yes, I do have ID. Can I reach for it? It's in my bag. And then that way you're giving them all the information before you make any actions that could be deemed, threatening or whatever. And to go back to your point about that you could record things and you could scientifically prove, yeah, somebody uttered something or somebody reached for something or was doing this and that and everything. But I think the issue is that like in Philando Castile, he's reaching for something. I mean, that's scientifically provable that he was reaching for something. I mean, again, we don't have perfect video of him in the car or whatever, but just for this example,
Hmm.
is reaching for something, like, is that does that justify the cop being afraid for his life? And again, yeah, you can try to get rid of the fear and everything, but if you're going by justifiable actions, is a reaching motion when he's saying, like, don't do it, don't grab it, I mean, he's not saying don't grab the gun, don't grab anything, just sit there, don't move. If he said that, maybe nothing might have happened. So I don't know, but my point is that you have those actions that you can scientifically prove, but you can't prove them one way or the other. It's still a subjective action. Someone could look at that, oh, he's reaching for something, so he was reaching for the gun. We don't know. It could, I mean, who knows? But that's the action right there. That's what happened. That's the scientifically provable. He did it, and that's it. And he's in the wrong. You can't say who's in the wrong or who's in the right based on little teeny tiny actions like that. I think it does come down to a subjective situation. But I would be 100% for a protocol for citizens acting in situations with police officers. And then,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah, that would be, yeah, that would be fine, I suppose. It's just, um, okay, so if Castile was reaching for his glove box or something,
yeah,
um, and his gun was not in there, right? It was his license or whatever. That would be scientifically provable that he was reaching for the license and not the gun. but it would only be provable after the fact when the police, it's not
Exactly.
knowable to the policeman what
Exactly.
was in the
Exactly.
glove box. Okay. Yeah, so I get that. Um,
Mhm.
so, so you have to consider um, what what the police officer would have known at that time. And in my case, like, you could say, oh, well, I could have had a gun in my bag, right? And when he asked for my ID, yeah, he could think that I was actually reaching for a gun or something. Um, it just seems so. It just seems like such. Once you've asked for something,
Yeah, yeah. It's silly,
okay. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
so the next time that I had an encounter with a policeman, um, I was coming home from work and I went through that same area, through the train tracks, and the policeman
Hmm.
stopped me and he asked me for ID, and I said, "Yeah, it's in my bag. Can I get it?" So I had learned from that first encounter, and I did exactly what you suggested. And he said yes. Okay. And so he was, they were white cops both times. And, and so he was okay with me reaching in that time. Now,
Hmm.
what if I had a gun in there actually? Wouldn't that be the perfect time? So it's like, it's like, it's possible for the cop to have, even in that situation, had thought, wait a minute, maybe he's actually pulling out a gun and pretending to go for his ID, you know? And then he might feel
Yeah, I
fear.
think that. So I think right now,
Okay, so like in that case, though, in that case,
yeah.
if he had claimed that he felt fear at that point, then would you think, well, maybe we should make that a criminal action at that point? Like if he were to shoot me then. Okay, so he says, "Do you have ID?" I say, "Yes. Can I get it?" And then he says, "Yes." I reach for it. He shoots me. In that case, would you then think, well, maybe we should have some kind of legal action against the police officer?
Because I mean, okay, trying to think. I mean, it could also be dictated in how you reach for it. I think that you could scientifically prove that like you're not slowly moving for it and everything and taking out your thing and giving it to it in a very compliant kind of manner and everything. Instead, you're like, "Oh, can I get it?" And they're like, "Yes." And you're like, and you very quickly, like like very erratically, like that's very alarming to anybody. And I would say that that's like, but then again, I mean, that's not like a shootable, like you shouldn't be shot because you're I don't know, whatever, who cares, you have some sort of like muscular disorder, whatever, I don't know, like
Hmm.
just something that could be interpreted like that. I don't think that, but
So now
yeah,
you're getting into the whole, like, even if that procedure, even if so the procedure that you would like to see would include not only the civilian using the correct spoken words, but that they also move in a very specific way.
yeah.
Uh, so it's really slowly, or like unnaturally slow, I suppose it would have to be.
Yeah, or I don't know, I mean that you could even maybe put in parts of the protocol to where it's like, okay, yeah, if you have a bag, you could do something like, you could, I don't know, like, do you want me to reach for the ID, or do you want to take the bag and look for it yourself and everything?
Right,
And then
right.
I guess the cop could have those options or something like that. Or you could say like, yeah, it's in my back pocket. Can I reach for it and take it out and everything? And then that way it's up to the cop to say like, wait, like, turn around first. That way I can see your back pocket before you reach for it. And so you turn around, they can see, and then
Or
that way,
just have the cop reach for it in all cases.
yeah, or yeah, you could do that, but then you start to get into, was it the stop and frisk type of stuff and everything, which that I haven't. I don't have a full like hard stance either way on it. Where because it does open up avenues for abuse to where cops can stop anybody when it's like clearly, I don't know, of no threat, or it doesn't match the suspect they're looking for at all, and they're just doing it just because, whatever. But so I don't have
With stop and frisk, I mean, let me see. The only thing I thought about it was like it's not automatically a bad idea. I mean, when I
agreed.
first heard of it, it's just that the problem was that they were targeting people for their
Yeah,
race or ethnicity, and so that was where the issue was.
yeah. So I think that it's like, okay, well, it's a good idea in theory, but when you put it into practice, there are ways that it can be abused, and you want to avoid that, but at the same time, like, stop criminal action. So it's like,
Yeah,
like
yeah. So yeah, basically, I would be okay with some kind of like having. It's like it might be the perfect solution might be just to have the policeman do it himself to reach in for the ID himself. Um, Let me see. I was like on that day. What happened next was so I gave him my ID and he was calling it in, uh, and he asked me to put the bag down and step away from it. After that, while he was waiting for them to run my numbers. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, so yeah, that was fine for him. Let me see. Like I wouldn't have minded if, I say, "Can I? Yes, I have my ID. Can I reach for it? Can I get it for you?" And the police officer might say, "No, let me get it myself." And I just put the bag down and step back, and he goes and gets it, right? So yeah, if we wanted to have that kind of protocol, that would be fine. Um, but couldn't we still have that law in place? We make that protocol the law. Why, why would you be against that?
Making the protocol a law.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
saying,
I'm not completely against it. I was just getting into like if you get to the point where you have to give the cop the option to like the to like like, oh, do you want to check my bag, or like check my back pocket, or basically like once you interact with the cop, you just have to like keep your hands up and don't move until the cop can go and like check, make sure you're not armed and all these other things. But then I think that gets into stop and frisk, and that can like
yeah,
and
yeah. I
I
think stop and frisk. I think that racial issue can be solved in a different way. Basically, it would involve looking at the scientific evidence to see what are the disparities, if see if there are disparities in who the cops are stopping. Okay, so I think it could be just solved that way.
but
To see if they're doing racial profiling. Now,
but,
now
okay,
then,
well, or I want to kind of address that. Like, let's say you're in a neighborhood that is 90% Hispanic, and that neighborhood happens to have like the most amount of crime in your area.
uh huh.
So if you're going around that neighborhood and you're stopping Hispanic people, like is that discriminating? Are you
As long as you're
like is
stopping 10% white people or whatever, I mean that would be okay with me. I mean it depends on the local population. I would
Okay, yeah,
think.
but what if you look at the crime statistics in that area and like just, let's say the white people are not committing any crimes in that area, or maybe they are, but it's, yeah,
Uh huh.
not violent assaults or something like that. So when you're stopping people on the street, that's not like that's not even your concern. So I'm looking at what is it, Sam Harris's arguments on profiling and everything.
Uh
Like
huh.
I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, again, there are ways that it can be abused and everything, and you're specifically stopping somebody of a certain race just because they're of a certain race. But I don't think it's irrational for cops that live in like high minority population areas to and they constantly deal with crime. That's literally their job.
Uh-huh.
For them to sort of have these biases that they've built over the years that, like, okay, well, if you, every single day of your job as a cop, you interact with, you know, a black person, or even if it's like, if it's white people committing crimes in a certain area, if you do that for years, you're going to look at white people and assume, like, deep down, or like, okay, this has happened so many times throughout my entire life, like, you know, I feel that I have like an instinct about this. And to, I don't know, to disregard that, I think is, I don't know, and oh, you know, I don't know, it's a weird kind of situation, and I
All
don't
right, all
think
right.
it's.
So when it comes to Sam Harris, when did you start listening to him?
I think I saw him, I think, on the Rubin Report, and then I haven't listened to much of his podcasts. I did listen to the one that you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
but and that's one of the few things that I don't necessarily agree with Sam Harris on, about with him and, was it Charles Murray, right, about
Yeah.
the stuff that we shouldn't research into or stuff like that, and that I would say I'm against that. I think that if it's scientifically provable or anything like that, or it's some sort of like facts that you can find out about race or about whatever, I mean, it's still a fact. It's not like if you don't research it, you're just not going to know it. But I see his argument saying that, like, it might not be worth it because, you know, this may be fuel for white supremacists, or, you know, it may give rise to some other, you know, supremacist group or something like that out of the research that's gained and everything. So it's saying that there's more harm that could be done than good. There's not really much that we can gain from doing that kind of research. And I see that argument, but at the same time, I still feel that if you wanted to do that research, there should be nothing wrong with that.
Um, okay, so
But yeah, as
the
far as,
racial with the racial profiling
yeah, sorry,
issue.
getting off topic.
No, that's fine. So you heard him express that view on the Rubin report. Is it? Is that what you're saying?
I
Or
don't.
or
I
you don't
don't think
remember?
so. He might have. I know that he's mentioned his views on profiling and stuff like that. He
Uh-huh.
might have brought it up in the Rubin report. But that's like little stuff that I've seen of
Okay,
him.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, my view is that if you're going to use crime statistics to differentiate between racial groups and stuff, I was
Mm.
like, I was like, I was okay with that at first, and I didn't like when he was talking about Muslims at airports. So
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was saying that, you know, he wants there to be a way for the TSA agents to look at whenever they see a potentially Muslim person, to make sure that they, you know, check them or something. Um, Now my issue with him is that he's not wording things correctly, and he should be talking about Islamism, and that's going to be the difference. So you have to think, you know, could this person be an Islamist and have like violent? Uh, uh, could that person be willing to use violence to advance a Muslim caliphate or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when he's speaking about this topic, he just says Islam writ large, and so that's why people get upset with him. Whereas I think if he said Islamism, or if he's saying that he's looking for Islamists, you know, especially you know, those,
Okay. I
yeah,
see
yeah.
what you're
So
saying. I'm
anyway,
making that
so
distinction. Okay.
he's not being specific enough, and that's why people are so upset with him
Mhm.
on that
Yeah.
part. But then I happened to go over to one of the Reddit pages, and so then I changed my mind about this topic, because I was okay with that idea, and I was considering I'm okay with the idea. I was okay with the idea of like, if we based it on the statistics and we only target those groups to the degree that they are the ones statistically who commit certain types of crime, then I would be okay with that. But then when I saw what's going on over on the alt-right subreddit, then I realized that, in order to keep those people from getting what they want, the better solution would be to so in order to stop the alt-right, we would have to be more like the racial profiling would lead to let me see how to put this. It would be like a permanent kind of system. It would be a permanent, like imagine like when we're trying to get to a colorblind society, the racial profiling angle, I think, would just perpetuate the way things currently are. We would look at people, and based on how they look, we would say, does this person look like they came from Chile? Because Chileans, they commit shoplifting more often than other groups. Okay, so if we can determine from the looks that the person might be Chilean, then we should look at that person more carefully when they're going into stores. And so if everyone were to learn all of the different statistics about, like imagine like if people had their iPhones updated with the latest statistics on each racial group and each ethnicity and nationality.
There'd be an app for it.
Yeah, yeah. And so it would be constantly updated so that you could see, like Chileans are now today at this percentage committing this type of crime, and Mexicans are committing this kind of crime at this rate. And then suppose we had everyone in society memorize these statistics and then try to do their best to implement them, right? That would perpetuate
Oh, okay.
looking at
Okay.
people in a non-colorblind way. And so my solution would be like, we should just monitor everyone to see who's committing exactly which crimes and not necessarily break it down by race statistics.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good argument. Because I think that when you what is it like the smallest minority is the individual or something like that. But if you judge everybody based on individuals and everything and don't group them into identities and stuff
Right.
like that, then it's just I
And
think that that's the easiest and simplest solution rather than because my problem with the alt right is that they're just doing what the other races are doing, but they're just making it about white people. So they're saying every argument that I've seen for the alt-right and the white nationalists and stuff like that is basically like, okay, well, it's okay for them to do it. Why can't we do it too? And that's it. That's the biggest argument is that like, okay, well, this race does this thing and no one cares. This race does this thing, no one cares. Why can't we do it? And I feel like that's a very poor argument. You're not talking about the morality of what those other races are doing. I think what they're doing, it's either all bad or it's all good. And I think most of their arguments, it's all bad. But yeah,
yes, yeah.
Go ahead.
Basically, what I'm thinking is that argument that they're making is powerful in a certain because what they're basically doing is they're saying that there should be no double standards. Well,
Agreed.
well,
Yeah, yeah,
in my debate system, in logical debate, I
yeah,
set out that there cannot be double standards. Okay,
yeah.
so if I want people to stop using double standards, then yeah, they would have a point when saying, it shouldn't be okay for this race of people to do this, but
Yeah.
morally bad for the other race. So yeah, in that sense, it's a difficult position for me to argue against, and that's why people are having so much trouble. If you want to, like I'm against double standards. Now, normal people are not against these double standards that much, and that I didn't used to be against double standards so much. Uh, yeah, so I used to think uh, like black people can make certain jokes that white people can't, and I thought that was perfectly natural. given the history and all of that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was fine with that. And and now that I see that in order for logical debate to be spread and for everything to work out right, we need to stop using double standards. That's going to be the real. I think that's going to be my path to fighting against the alt right. So it's like just because they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. If they think that the other races are doing something morally bad, then they should not do it themselves. They should just
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
criticize the other people for doing that morally bad thing, and that's where
Yeah,
they should have stopped.
yeah,
Um,
they're justifying that, like, okay, well, we see that there's, uh, you could describe them as black supremacists, and it's like, hey, if it's okay for these guys to do it, what's wrong with us doing it and everything? And I think that, okay, well, you're justifying a bad action by, oh, look at that guy over there, he's doing a bad action.
uh huh.
That is no way to justify it. But yeah, I think that they do make some compelling arguments, though, and I'm not a fan of Richard Spencer. He just seems like a I don't know, just a troll, I guess, to people, and just a kind of a jerk. But and initially, when I was looking into the alt right and stuff, the first person I think I ran into or white nationalism was Jared Taylor, who's a
Uh-huh.
lot more articulate, and he makes some compelling arguments, and it's almost like I almost bought into it. And I was like, that's some pretty decent arguments and everything. And then yeah, after sitting down thinking about it, it's like, no, all of this is bad. Like it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't say like, I mean, I don't know. Is it morally bad to want to protect your heritage and everything, or wanting to keep your your genetic line of one race or something like that? I mean, that's like a whole separate thing, and we don't have to get into that. That's a question I have.
Okay, so yeah, that is questionable to me.
Yeah,
If we're going to try to be reaching for color blindness, then it shouldn't be a priority. That is
yeah,
a problem. That that just perpetuates these separations. Trying to maintain your bloodline and all of that, the purity and your culture is having a separate culture from everyone else. I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, if we're gonna be talking, my goal is to reach colorblindness. Okay, so I'm
okay,
approaching it always from that angle. So will this help us achieve it or not? That's what I think.
okay. Okay, but I would say that it's also, I would say it's neither morally good nor morally bad. I mean, you can do it for morally bad reasons. If you think that your race is superior to all other races and everything, and that, I don't know, something along those lines, I think, okay, yeah, you're getting down uh, but I think that it's not necessary. You could do it, but not necessarily for a morally bad reason. Like the same thing with
When you
personal preferences
Yeah,
on.
when we're talking about those kinds of issues, what reasons are you doing these actions? Again, you have to limit the discussion to what is scientifically provable. So
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
have to start talking about what views has this person explicitly stated on the record. Okay.
yeah. But I'm saying the action itself of wanting to keep your heritage, like that specific action, like you are taking actions to, I don't know, like, yeah. Jared Taylor mentions, like, or somebody asked him, like, okay, well, what if your daughter, was dating someone not of the white race and everything? He's like, would you object to that? And he's like, yeah, I would. And I would try to let her know that, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this or something like that. I think that, having a talk like that is not necessarily bad, but if you're like going to completely disown your daughter and never talk to her and everything, I mean, it's completely her choice. But if you're going to disown her because of that and everything, I feel that that's way too far. But I think I would
I
put it
mean,
more in line with the same ideas as far as like personal preference on like sexual partners, or like whoever you want to be with. Some people have preferences, and you're attracted to certain races, and some people are not attracted to other races and everything. And it's just more of that kind of attraction and everything. And I think that there's nothing morally bad in what you're attracted to. That's just kind of, that's it. But as far as you wanting to maintain that line and everything, the action itself, I don't think is morally bad.
Okay,
But
hold
yeah,
on, hold on. So, so if Jared Taylor was asked that question, and he says that he would talk to his daughter and
yeah,
advise her to not marry that guy,
yeah.
that would be a problem for me because he's going based solely on the race of the other guy and not that. Yeah, that is. It depends on. Okay, so Jared Taylor, he's already alt right, so
Yeah, yeah.
white nationalist. So he's already out of bounds there. All right, so this is just
So he's too far gone.
yeah. I mean, I would have to debate against him. He's going to be a tough person. Yeah, he's going to be the toughest person I know of to debate against. Okay, but I think
Yeah,
I could do it. So like for him to say something like that, that falls in line with the alt right ideology, and so
yeah.
I would attack him on those grounds. Now with normal people, like if they tend to be attracted to people of the same race, that would not be an issue with me because they're not they're not saying that their own race is superior. They're not saying they're not advising against marrying into other races just because of the race. As long as they're not doing that, yeah, that's fine. If it just turns out that black people tend to marry black people and white people tend to marry white people, that would be fine with me. But when one person is telling another person, I believe that's morally bad. I do not approve.
No, see. I think it depends on what you define as like, or how that talk goes. Because if he says like you shouldn't marry this person or whatever because of their race and stuff like that, if he kind of expresses a concern or says like I don't know, like maybe you should try to find somebody like that. But if he were to completely write this person off and disown her, not talk to them,
Well,
whatever.
disowning that's in the area of punishment. Okay, for me,
Yeah,
I make a
yeah,
distinction
okay.
between declaring what your moral views are and then punishing the person for doing the thing that you think is morally bad. So,
Yeah.
so
So
yeah.
I think that any form of punishment of doing that, I would say is wrong. But for him to express his views to his daughter and say that I think that you should do this, I mean, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. But I do think that once he, any sort of punishment because of that, and ultimately it is up to his daughter. It is 100% up to her, and he should not. I mean, he can express his views, but I would say that's it, though. He can't force her to do anything, no sort of punishment, nothing else. And hey, if
But
she ends up with that guy, fine.
the problem is that he's expressing an alt-right view. Once he utters that view, he's outing himself as an alt-right, like a yeah. I mean that kind of view is what we need to stop people from having, or at least expressing, so that it doesn't continue further. All right. So that kind of view is what's going to stop us from reaching colorblindness.
So okay, okay.
Once you've uttered that that you think it's morally bad, uh, once you've uttered that you think miscegenation is morally bad, that right there would be a problem for me. And I think if it's okay to say something like that, then we won't ever reach colorblindness.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've thought about all these issues, and I think I've come up with a set of views that can solve all of these different problems, and it's comprehensive. I think.
Yeah. I think that I think the argument that he usually comes from is trying to either protect his kind of heritage or is trying to he finds value in his own heritage and everything, which in and of itself is not right. But I think you're right that what he's doing because of that, by telling his daughter not to, oh, maybe you shouldn't marry this person, whatever. That's not necessarily like that's more discrimination than it is protecting your heritage. And I think that yeah, colorblindness is the better goal. So I would concede it, and I think that yeah, that there's
And and I also
that's where
think
I'm getting tripped up with it.
that when it comes to uh, Southerners who want to protect their Confederate heritage, um, yeah, so it's basically the same kind of thing. Actually, I'm thinking like the whole idea of separate cultures. Yeah, that's all going to be problematic when we're talking about a culture. Like, what culture am I part of? Is it possible to scientifically prove what culture I'm participating in?
Yeah, I would completely agree with you that like any sort of identity politics, like people are much more complicated than like their demographics. Like
Hmm.
nobody fits perfectly nice and neatly into their demographic, but like nobody. Everybody has some weird quirk, or everybody's really into something that you wouldn't expect them to be into, and it's but yeah. So I'm completely yeah for judging people based on their individual traits and stuff like that, and not grouping.
Yeah,
So
so yeah, I'm thinking like we're gonna have to stop talking about those kinds of issues about different cultures. Like, since we're in America, we may as well just talk about American culture and say, what counts as American culture, um, as opposed to, I don't know, the things that would divide us as Americans. Uh, like when we're talking about Islam and fear of Islamists coming in and imposing Sharia law or whatever. We could just talk about it in terms of, um, well, basically everything is going to boil down to moral views. So, in order to, the best way to describe a person's views is just to simply list exactly what their moral views are, starting with it being morally bad to act hypocritically, and you just list all of them that way. That's the most complete, the best description of them. And even these names that we come up with for groups of people, like alt right and SJW and all of that, even that's yeah, those are those are shortcuts that might be useful in some cases. But the best way I think is to just list everyone's views and yeah, so like maybe when we start talking about different cultures, like the black culture, I think it's like a shortcut that people are using uh, for something that would be better explained by listing the specific views of each individual person. So in order to reach colorblindness, I think we would have to stop using white culture, black culture, southern culture, and all these different heritages things. Stop talking about separate heritage and just talk about the actual views that people hold and just list them.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
all right, so let's see. Now, I was thinking about the race and IQ issue. So I watched Jared Taylor on this issue. That's where it's going to get hard because, like I said, he wants to separate people into race by this and use that as an explanation for why there are social differences in economics between the races, the amount of achievement.
hmm
Uh, so, like, first of all, I'm when I first heard of affirmative action, I thought, that's not necessary. It's a bad idea. And then, I mean, when I first learned about it in school and stuff, I didn't realize that it was actually in certain places.
yeah,
But having learned that it is in place, um, the definition of affirmative action that I've heard is that if you have two candidates and they're equally qualified, then you can take the black person, so that you increase the chances that black people can move up the ladder more quickly. All
yeah,
right, and so I don't necessarily. Yeah, I would prefer if it was just colorblind, right? But I
yeah,
can
yeah,
see the argument for why this way would be faster to reach some kind of to get black people to be higher up in companies and all of that. this process would
Uh,
be faster, and it's pretty fair. And so, yeah, I'm not necessarily I don't. I'm not necessarily against that system. And then the people on the right, the way I see it, is that they mischaracterize what affirmative action is, and they say that you're lowering standards to get more black people in. And yeah, I think that's a mischaracterization. And if that is what's actually happening, then I would, in fact, be against it. Okay, so what do you think about it?
yeah, I mean, yeah, the definition is, yeah, when it comes down to like you have two equal candidates and everything, like I feel that there's that never happens. I mean, if you have you have the interview, you have like they didn't go to unless they are like identical twins, and the interview happened in exactly the same manner. They're not identical candidates. So I feel like
Well,
you're
then
never.
they reach the qualification. They're both equal. They're qualified. I mean, if they're both reach the minimum qualifications for the job.
Yeah, but I'm saying that, one interview could go better than the other. Or let's say one person during the interview, they sort of fit the type of work attitude that everybody has. Or you think that this candidate will work better with your other employees or something like that. Or sometimes you just get someone that comes in that is like they're qualified, but they're, I don't know, overly cocky or just, saying things that are 100% wrong and everything. And on paper, they're qualified, but, they're in interviews. I think that there's a lot of variation. It's an interaction between people and everything, and you can go based on their interviews. But yeah, I think that almost never happens. But even then, even if you did have two perfectly identical candidates, you're now bringing race into it and picking out of a trait that neither of those people chose to have. You're just picking them based on something that is not in any way merit based. And yeah, I'm much more for the colorblind aspect, where it's okay. You try to, and I mean, you could even make the argument that like, okay, well, we want more diversity here. We don't have any. We do have two perfectly identical candidates and everything, but when you mandate that diversity, that I'm against. If you're a company and you want to hire more diverse people, hey, that's completely your prerogative. You can do whatever you want. But I'm more in line with like you should be able to hire whoever you want based on whatever you want. Uh,
So you're talking more about the free market idea.
yeah, I think that I'm more in line with that. That
So
it should
have
just
you?
be left to whoever.
So are you like fiscally conservative now?
I lean more towards that and everything. I like the idea of small government, and but I do like a lot of the stuff that's discussed on the Rubin Report, classical liberalism, libertarian ideas and everything, but not so far gone into like anarcho-capitalist. Like I'm more in line with the classical liberal ideas where there is a function for the state, and the state shouldn't be the smallest it can possibly be. Like I do think that there are some good that it can be done with it, but most of the time they waste money. So,
Okay, so yeah, I'm not. I my instinct is still to be fiscally liberal. Okay, so yeah, I liked Bernie Sanders, for example. Uh, Basically, I think that helping people who need help is a good idea, and the idea that the government would be big is not a negative thing to me. If that's how many people need help, I don't see how describing the government as big is somehow has a negative connotation. Yeah. So anyway, I was pretty baffled by that in the first place. Now since I've come to understand libertarianism, I think I understand why it is that people could want a small government that hardly does anything. And I think I can finally understand, why why conservatives, fiscal conservatives, like states' rights over the federal government's rights. I mean, the federal government is what makes America America. Otherwise, we'd be separate countries. All the states would be separate countries. It doesn't make. I mean, I thought we
No,
were supposed to be. I thought we were supposed to be patriotic about being Americans, and what makes it America is the federal government. So how could you be against the federal government? But anyway, I
so
think I.
okay. No. I think that it's not. I think America is not a one size fits all in most situations. There are some situations where, like, yes, it should be a federal mandate that everybody has to follow this everywhere and everything. But I love the idea that the federal government says, like, you know what, we don't know the specific way to go about solving this problem. We're going to kick it back to the states. And then you basically have 50 different experiments of how to tackle this problem. And then eventually what should happen, rather than like one idea that everybody's stuck with until, you know, enough people complain to where it gets changed, you have 50 different ways that it's implemented, and then, you know, it'll work itself out. And then, hey, let's say California comes up with the best way to solve this problem, that, hey, Oregon can take that idea and just implement it similarly. And then all of them can kind of, like, you know, there should be more cooperation between the states, though.
What if
I think that's one thing that's kind of,
what if
I don't know,
what
not
if
necessarily.
one state figures out the best way to solve a problem? Why would you be against the federal government and imposing that on everyone?
Like, I'm not, and I'm not saying that big government is necessarily like a bad thing. And yeah, having a big government is not inherently bad. It's just that again, I think that there's more opportunity for waste, opportunity for I like the idea of the free market solving its own problems and everything, because that can happen much quicker, and people can decide what exactly works best for them in those situations. But I do think that there should be government intervention in some situations and everything. But if it can be figured out in the free market, it should be, rather than having to go to the government to petition, to get senators to get together and make a bill and change something, and all of that takes forever. Whereas,
It
oh,
doesn't need to take forever. It doesn't need to take forever.
agree, but in the certain in
If you
the
just voted for Democrats, it would have been faster, right? We could be having a lot of progress if everyone just voted for Democrats. Man, that could happen quickly if people stopped lying about what the truth is, right? Anyway,
why would you want all Democrats?
because they're the ones who care about logic and truth and facts. And
uh,
and then you're saying that, you know, there's, with a big government there's more opportunity for waste. Um, when did you when did you take me through the process that led to you
okay.
becoming.
Okay, the simple kind of way of I guess explaining it, or the way it was explained to me and everything, as far as big government, is uh, it's basically like a third party interaction with a lot of situations where you want to get something done and somebody else wants to get something done, or you want to make something else work or whatever, but you're basically sending money to a third party that has no benefit either way, that then decides how that money is spent. So in almost every situation there's going to be waste in that, whereas where you could just pay for it yourself or do the service yourself, whatever. And there in a lot of cases as well, there's no real incentive to get better with certain services. Like the example that comes to mind is the post office, where post office used to take forever for things to get done and everything, and that's all government run. But then when FedEx comes in, now you have overnight shipping, tracking numbers, everything else and everything, and now you have competing things that then also make money, whereas the post office is not making money, but it adds that competition aspect, whereas putting everything into the government, there's no incentive to want to do things better. That's
What about morality? Isn't morality an incentive to do things better? You could just say, "Hey, it's morally good to get even faster, to provide more services," and it's like you're assuming that that's not a real incentive. To me, that's what it seems like you're saying. So, yeah. So anyway, I think I understand what you're saying. Like I just heard Adam Carolla saying stuff about the post office workers. They're really upset. I mean, he went on David Smalley a few weeks ago, and he brought up this example of you should just look at how a post office worker works, like the postal service guy when he's delivering mail. You can just see that he's walking back and forth and he's taking his time. But then when you look at the UPS worker or FedEx or whatever, you see that they're running because they get paid per package they deliver and stuff like that. And it's like you're making a broad assumption. You know, if there were slow people in the post office, you could just say, hey, it's morally good to work hard at work. You know, and then just like that, you would solve that problem. Okay.
Yeah, but again, like, there's also, like, with government workers and everything, it's damn near impossible to get fired at a government job. You really have to, like, go out of your way to get fired at a government job. And a lot of, like, you're
assuming
like,
that. You're assuming. You hope that's
okay,
the case, okay?
No,
But
no,
maybe
no, I'm not hoping that's the case. Like, anybody that I've talked to, that's the joke, is that government jobs are really cushy.
Oh my God.
People take 2-hour-long breaks and stuff like that, and no one really cares. It's okay,
Then
yeah.
that's
Well,
the
it's
problem.
going to get taken care of.
I care. I'm a Democrat. Democrats care.
I care.
Okay?
I care as well, and that's why I feel like.
I want to know if people are wasting the government's money. Okay? I actually want to know that because I care about the poor people who are in need and are not being helped. Okay? So I care about that stuff. I want to know if there is some kind of yeah.
Okay, so you're okay. So you are a, yeah, I guess fiscal liberal is, yeah, that's a good term for it. So you're not opposed to government spending, and you like the idea of people putting in their tax money to this, but you are very harsh on waste. And you would like to have some sort of maybe regulatory group that goes through and makes sure that nobody's working slowly, everybody's working
Not
hard.
necessarily regulatory. I would say the ideal system.
Uh-huh.
Like if we had
It's
24/7 surveillance, you know,
a
people could tell.
self-regulating system.
Yeah. We could finally figure out who it is who says, "Oh, you know, government jobs are cushy, and I can just take 2-hour breaks." You know, once that gets caught on microphone, then we could get that person fired, or you know, we could tell them to work harder, something like that. So, yeah, I'm against people being lazy like that at work. So if you want to concentrate on that, we would agree. So you don't have to have a free market necessarily in order to do that. We don't have to undo. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see anything inherently wrong with that, but I think that when you make it a single entity that is in charge of certain things, that I think when you make it a single entity and everything, then and they just take care of all services regarding whatever it is, then you lessen competition. And yes, there's that inherent, like, okay, yeah, well, you know, is there a way that we could do this better? I think that people are easier to, like, you know, if there's no real drive or something actually pushing at them to want to compete or to get better and better and faster, I think most people are very complacent and will just kind of, again, that's an opinion, and you would have to inject some sort of competition into that system for me to really, like, kind of get behind it. And that's why I think that the free market is a much better solution, where you have two companies that are constantly competing to drive down prices. That way they can beat the other guy and improve their services and quality. And that is much better for consumers, for the companies themselves, and for everybody all around. But then again, I mean, there are ways that, there are ways that can be abused, but then that's not a perfect free market, where you have, collusion with prices and other sort of things like that. Those, in any case, if you've ever been on the subreddit late stage capitalism or whatever, it's, I don't know, that's one of the most frustrating pages that I've ever been on. But yeah, it's very very socialism or pro-socialism, and very against capitalism, and points out all of the problems with capitalism. But it's more like, pointing out bad capitalism or pointing out ways that capitalism is abused. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so I understand the libertarian argument. I understand what it is. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I even think I understand, why it is that, people would want states' rights, because it's like you want a system in which, the way I see it is, once you've said that, the free market is good and all of that, the other thing that you would want to say is that the way the system should be set up is such that everyone is able to quickly have an effect on the minds of the people who are close to them physically. So I can change the minds of the people in my city more easily than I can change the people's minds in Oklahoma or whatever, because I don't live there, and I'm not going to. And so with a libertarian view, they're saying that because it's easier for each person to change the minds of the people who are closest to them, that's where the government, that's the local government should have the say over that local area, so that it's
yeah,
easier. Like you could go to a city council and change the people's minds there, and then that would have a direct effect on that local area, and so it would
yeah,
be responsive like that. So I understand that kind of argument, but at the same time, I still think that if we determine that a certain action is morally bad, then that means that it's morally bad for anyone to do it, and therefore, it doesn't matter where in the country you are, you know, that should be in,
yeah. Agreed. Like,
like
yeah,
if
if you
if
you
enough
can
people
prove that
agree.
this is a yeah, if you can prove that this is a morally bad action and everything, then I feel like yeah, it should be a shoe-in at in Washington. It should be yeah, we can all agree on this. This is a bad action. Done. Um, but yeah, but I feel that there's a lot of situations where there's like two or three different ways to tackle a certain issue, and none of them are necessarily morally bad, and it's not that easy in black and white and everything. And I think in those cases, it's better to have it at that local government section. But yeah, to
And
your point, I completely agree. If you could determine, yes, this is 100% morally bad action, we're going to make this wrong and punishable, whatever, done, passed.
yeah, and so like I would agree with that your point about like if there are three different approaches to try to solve a problem, I'd say, hey, let's have a time limit, and after that time limit, the winner, the system that leads to the best results, then that gets imposed on everyone. Okay,
See,
that's
okay,
how I think that would.
okay, but see, I would say that I mean, it's not always a one size fits all situation. What works in California may not work in Texas,
Why
or
wouldn't
what
it work? Let's think about it. Let's go
I
into the
mean, no,
details.
you really have to. Okay, yeah, you really have to like parse out specifically what it is. But okay, I would even, okay, I think a better example is kind of, no, that's not necessarily a better example, but I'm thinking like, okay, like you could look at other countries and like looking at the U.S. versus Sweden or whatever, some place that has 100% universal student, or it's free to go to college.
Yeah.
All of it's free. I think that if you have, like the conclusion we got to it at work, talking with coworkers and stuff, we were all kind of thinking that it comes down to a mindset. That it really, if everybody in your population of your state and everything is all of the same mindset, that like, okay, this idea works, we all are going to try to go to college, we all want to get these type of jobs and everything. If you have the vast majority of people wanting to follow that system, then it can work if everybody's on the same page. But if you have a divided country where half the people are like, like I'm just fine with a high school degree, I don't want to pay taxes and for it to go into the system where everybody can go to college when I'm not even going to benefit from that. And there's a lot of people that are just like, I don't even want to do that, or I don't want to go to college. Then it doesn't work. Then you have a lot of wasted money.
No, I thought you were going to use a separate kind of example. I thought you were going to say that, like, if everyone had the same mindset where they wanted to go college and get a good job and all of that. That would be fine and it would work. But if there's a country like America where half of the people want to go into liberal arts schools and get pointless degrees,
Yeah,
then
that
it
is
wouldn't work. Okay, then that would be waste. And I
that's
thought
a
you were going
better
to make that argument.
yeah, that's a better argument because if you
Yeah,
but either way, I mean, I think because I think it's Texas has the highest high school dropout rate, or yeah, highest high school dropout rate, and I think it's because there's a lot of rural communities to where there's a lot of people that like it's easier for them to just go help out at the family farm, and they're going to raise cattle, they're going to raise horses, whatever, and they make a decent living with that, and they don't need physics and chemistry and all these other
that's
classes and
terrible.
everything.
That's terrible.
I would say that, but at the same time, I'm more for you should be able to live your life how you want. It shouldn't be mandated that you need to know all these things. If you can make a perfectly fine living off of doing all those other things,
I'm not
who am I
saying
to say?
college is mandatory. I'm not imagining that
But
college would be
making
mandatory.
everybody pay into it, if you're making everybody pay into it, I feel that that's like you should really, really want to go and everything because your money is going towards that. But if you don't want to, I feel like you shouldn't have to pay for that.
What? Yeah. That argument about like if you're paying for something that you need to partake, you would. Yeah, I never
I
thought
think
about
it's
that
easier.
way. I don't. It's
I think
like
it's much easier. You just like I want to go to college, so I'm going to take the loans. I'm going to pay for it. That's much easier than okay. Everybody has to pay into the government. The government then has to divide out each money to the different universities, and then those universities decide, okay, yeah, who are we going to accept, whatever, or whatever. I mean, not that they have to worry about accepting, because if it was free, everybody would try to go. But
no,
either
not
way,
necessarily. Goodness. Okay, so my biggest disagreement with
okay,
you is that
okay,
you
okay.
go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry. Go ahead.
All right, so my biggest disagreement with you is that you're thinking, man, I learned about this in freaking elementary school that we all pay in taxes so that the public schools have enough money to educate the children, okay? And even the grown men who had no children, even those guys need to pay taxes so that the school system works. I mean, that's just how that's what I like about government. Okay, so that it turns out that even poor people can have their children educated. Okay, and so that's how the ideal of how it would work. Yeah, of course, even if you don't have children, because of morality, it's a moral issue there, where of course should still. I'm not saying that I have this moral view per se, but that's what I like about the system. It's out of a moral issue. It's a moral issue, and that's why those people should still pay into the system. That's why everyone should pay taxes, because that
But I mean,
money is going towards a good cause, even if it doesn't even if it doesn't directly benefit the person who's paying the taxes.
okay, well, what about the person that can self-educate? What if their parents feel that I can teach my son, better than these schools can? I can self-educate them.
Is it
I will get them to that education level or whatever, and then they can go and educate themselves into, higher level maths and higher level whatever they want, and they could teach themselves. Why?
to make up for the people who can't afford to teach their own children that? What if what if the parents already have two jobs each, and they can't, they can't homeschool their own children, or
Okay,
it's to make up for those who can't afford it, the losers of the free market.
okay, I think that teaching up to high school level and everything, I see the benefit in that, and but I think in the, I don't know. I guess what I was saying was with the Texas high school dropout rate and everything. I think that they should still pay into the education system up to high school and everything, but I don't think that we should get into a free college system. Just because college is not for everybody. If I would say high school is for the vast majority of people. There are some people that are just not, that are not going to succeed in it, or they don't want to succeed in it, and they have other plans and stuff like that, and that's okay. But I think that college, you're going to have a lot of dropouts and everything, and I do agree that yes, there are some people that can't afford to get to those institutions, and I do understand, okay, everybody paying into a system that gets up to high school level, that I'm for. But I mean, you have scholarships, you have government grants, you have all these other programs that can help you get to that level of college if you can't afford it. There's plenty of ways to go about solving that problem, but making it just free for everybody, I do not think that's the solution.
Because then some people would be paying into the government, they would be paying taxes, and yet not going to school because it's not for them in the first place. Okay, so I'm thinking like, basically, it's possible to have a society where everyone is encouraged to get as high of an education as they can. And so
Yeah.
if there are people who are going to high school who are not going to succeed, then we can debate them and help them realize that education is important, and we could try to get them to succeed anyway. All right. Now, after high school, I mean, because it's good for the society to be educated to that certain degree. So yeah, of course, I would think a better system would be, we encourage everyone to graduate from high school. All right.
Yeah.
Now, after high school, yeah, sure, some people are not going to necessarily want a college degree. They don't want to go to college. Okay, and that's fine. The idea of free college would be that if you want to go to college, then you can. Okay? And so if your concern is that there will be people who say, "Oh, wow, free college, let me just go and try to get a useless degree." Well, we can debate against those people. We can find out we can catch them on microphones saying that, and then debate against them and block out those people who are going to get pointless degrees. Like, if you want, we could try to stipulate, these are the kinds of degrees that you need to aim for based on the availability of jobs.
I had a program idea for this. That you could do something like the government decides, okay, I don't know, not very libertarian idea, but I guess the idea was that
Classical
okay,
liberal, you could just say classical liberal, and then it would fit whatever you want.
there you go. But yeah, the idea that like, okay, this is for I guess the argument of like American prosperity, whatever. But basically, you have a group of scientists go in and or researchers, statisticians, or whatever. They all come in and they basically say, okay, in 4 or 5 years from now, what is going to be the job that is in the most demand?
Uh-huh.
They find that job and they find the degree requirements for that job. Say it's a computer science degree or something like that. Then for that year, if you the government basically makes that degree free
Uh-huh.
for across all, and you could do this for maybe like, I don't know, this doesn't have to go on indefinitely. You could do this for 10, 15 years or something like that. But you would get this huge boom in whatever the desired math and science type of degrees are. But yeah, and you could do something to where like, yeah, in 4 or 5 years, it'll be computer science. And then if you lock in your degree now and set that as your major at whatever college you're at, then it's free for the next 4 years. But you have to, I think you have to,
Get good
yeah,
grades.
it's something like all straight A's or something like that. And then, yeah, it's completely free.
How did you even come up with the idea in the first place? Because that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about. You're saying free is automatically... Okay, go ahead.
But by making the whole system free, yeah, there's more problems with all of that. But I think that by making that degree, and then you make it to where, yes, you have to get straight A's or something like that, or you have to make... So you get A's and B's. Let's say A's and B's would be better. But you have to... That way it's not just, oh, if you get a C, you barely pass the class, that's okay. Like, no. Like, if you get a C, you got to pay for that whole course. But yeah, A's and B's, I think that's adequate. Everybody should be able to accomplish that and everything, and then... But you make it all 4 years, or at the end, your
that's
student loans are wiped.
That's completely within what I believe the Democrats would be A-okay with. I mean, goodness, why don't you just say that at the beginning? Shoot. Yeah, we wasted all this time.
But I don't think it's a sustainable plan. I think that you could do it for a couple of years and everything, and I think that it basically you're putting an investment. The government is basically making all of these degrees free and everything, and it's guaranteed to only pay out to people that accomplish that goal. And then those people will go on, and you will get nice booms in all of the degree fields that you want and everything. But yeah, but I don't think that it should go on indefinitely.
Why?
I mean, I would say that if it pays
Because
off
it's
in
not
the
the
end,
free market?
no, not that it's not the free market, but I don't know. I think that there's already a huge problem with student loans and federal government aid, where you can just get a student loan for whatever the college demands, and then you can just rack up that student debt and everything, and the college gets paid off right then and there. And there's no incentive to drive down prices between universities. So universities are basically like, okay, well, yeah, we're going to set the price of tuition here. And the government's like, okay, yeah, we're going to give you the student loan. And then the college basically gets paid out right there. And they're like, hey, you know what? Tuition's going to go up next year. It's going to go up by, $20 per credit hour and everything. The government is still going to pay it. People are still going to go.
Not necessarily. I mean, that's a kind of that's a fixable problem, I think.
So what's the solution to that? I want to hear your.
You monitor everyone, and you find out, are these people slacking off? Are they being lazy? Is the college really teaching classes that meet certain standards, or not? You could have a camera in each classroom to see, goodness. I mean, I think that's a solvable kind of thing. You shouldn't.
But how does that solve the? See, okay, my solution for it is to make almost every single degree able to take online. That way you're not stuck with, okay, me being in San Antonio, like, okay, well, UTSA is about my only good option for a good 4-year degree. I mean, I could go up to Austin, or I could go all the way over to College Station and everything, but those are the real big, 4-year universities. Or I guess, Texas State and some of the other ones that are a little closer. But your options are limited. And that forces, or that limits the amount of competition, because UTSA knows that it's going to get most of the people from San Antonio. So they don't have to, they can kind of compete with Texas State, which is kind of close, but they don't really have to, because most people are just going to go there. Whereas if you made every single degree online, except for maybe a lab portion where you could just go into a building that is for any college, whatever, and it just has to meet some sort of requirements for that room and that lab or something like that. But whatever, as long as it meets the requirements, you're good. But if you put all of the degrees online, then it opens up availability anywhere. And then that forces people okay, I don't have to drive super far to get to this nicer degree up at, some other bigger university or something like that. If you can do it all online and you have all of that opportunity there, and I feel like that will drive competition, that'll drive prices down and make colleges more competitive against each other. So I would say that once you do that, then you could implement that idea where, you make the top degree or the top needed degree graduates and everything. You could make that one free under certain circumstances.
All right, so basically I'm all in favor of online degrees. So that's a good idea. I like the idea of being able to, watch videos online and learn about all these things and educate myself. I'm into self-education myself. I like it, so I don't need to be around other people. I like the idea of online classes, and so that could just be an addition to everything else that I want. It doesn't mean. What kinds of classes are there that cannot be simply streamed online?
So I would say laboratory type of things where you specifically have to go through the motions of mixing chemicals, deriving certain things out of it. So any sort of chemistry lab, organic chemistry, biology labs as well, where you're doing dissections and everything. I would say those are still, you could watch a video of a dissection, but I really feel that it's I don't know, that actually like, getting in there and doing things. It's much more, you remember that a lot
Uh-huh.
better, and it's better overall for education. But
All right, so how about we just, you know, stream everything that's possible, even the dissections and the lab stuff. Okay, and then if you want to actually get a degree, you still have to go to the lab to demonstrate that you can do the movements. Okay,
mhm.
uh, and yeah, so whatever is possible to provide online, whatever kind of education that's possible to provide online. Yeah, I'm for that. It seems to me though that you are so caught up on this idea of like the end goal is competition between different groups of people. You want to find whatever you can to say, okay, once a competition is set up, then that's basically the end goal. That's the result that you want. And I'm thinking like you're making assumptions about what people's incentives are. And you're saying that if they're not incentivized by profit, then they have no incentive. And yeah, but anyway, I basically
No,
I,
I
I
think
basically agree with you on the whole education issue.
okay. I don't necessarily think that. I'm not saying that if the incentive's not there, people won't work.
A
I'm
financial
not.
incentive, financial
Sorry.
incentive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not saying that. Yeah, or a competitive financial. Yeah, financial incentive. If that's not there, I'm not saying that people won't work. I'm saying that.
What about okay? Anyway, I think it can be solved with morality. When you're talking, I think you're using that as a shortcut for what's morally good, for what people should do.
Oh yeah, I've got a good example of this. Um, so, well, it is another. I think it was a libertarian kind of argument video and everything, but they were talking about uh, the rhinos going extinct or something like that, or the ivory trade, and they cut off or poachers and everything. They'll kill rhinos, cut off their horns, and sell it
Uh huh.
for insane amounts of money. Like one giant rhino horn or whatever is like $300,000, something like that. Which is like the financial incentive is there to want to get these rhino horns and everything. But what libertarians are arguing for is you could flood the market with synthetic rhino horns, and then by doing that, you are now basically the solution in that area is they're saying that all ivory trade is like outlawed. You can't sell and do any of this. But there's still black market things going on, and poaching has like increased immensely because of this like banning of ivory trade, which they are banning it based on the morality that killing these animals for their horns and everything is immoral.
But they're not
And
enforcing it. They're not
they
successfully
are enforcing
enforcing
it.
it.
Yeah, they're not successfully enforcing it. But park rangers are dying. They're getting killed by poachers. Poachers are dying as well. And all of this like illegal trade is going on. When the libertarians are basically coming in and saying, "Hey, the incentive is there. Rather than fight the incentive, why don't you go or with morality and everything? Why don't you go the opposite way and say, hey, you know what? It's legal, and we're going to flood the market with synthetic rhino horn and stuff like that, and that's going to drive the price way down and make it not financially viable to go out and risk your life to kill a rhino so that way you can get their horns. Also, this allows people to create like rhino farms and everything because they can cut the horn off without killing the rhino. They sedate it and everything and can cut it off and it'll like seal over and then continue to grow. And then that way it gives an incentive for people to want to keep these rhinos and breed them and have more and more of them so that way they can farm more horns and sell them and get money that way. And then that way you lose the financial incentive for poachers, and then you also are doing a conservative effort to keep these rhinos alive, and then the species is no longer endangered. So I think that by fighting incentive with morality is not always the best answer.
All right,
And
so
I think it's
I heard about that argument, the argument about maybe we should legalize poaching and just have people, have these farms and the farm owners will try to protect their own herd, and they will be incentivized to protect their
well, not
animals.
necessarily
And
not make poaching legal, just that you make the ivory trade legal, and
yeah,
then
I'm just saying
yeah.
I heard it in a different context with
Okay,
different
okay, okay.
animals. Yeah, so I heard that kind of argument. Um, Yeah, that's basically like giving up on the moral issue. If the person, yeah, I just think a better if the law, if the illegal trade is going on, and if there's a large black market, the solution to that is better enforcement. That if you believe if the action is morally bad and it's leading to bad results, then the solution is better enforcement and 24/7 surveillance. That would solve the problem as well. So
Okay,
if
but okay. In this case, it's okay. In the case of better enforcement and everything, that's basically you're throwing more money into some sort of enforcement agency. Whereas if you do the opposite, everybody makes money except for the poachers. The farmers would make money. The animals themselves are going to, continue to thrive and everything.
let's talk about drugs, okay? Now,
No.
first,
Like, what is your argument against that though? I feel that.
it's the same. Okay, so there's an illicit market for illegal drugs. Okay,
Yeah.
now I come from a background where I think illegal drugs should remain illegal. I think
Okay.
it's very
I'm,
close to a moral issue for me. I
okay. I'm more of the opposite on
Yeah.
this. I'm kind of more like whatever you do on the weekend is your business. As long as you show up to work on Monday and you're good and everything, I feel that should be fine. Then again, I mean, I haven't done any very hard drugs or anything. I haven't done cocaine or heroin or anything. So I feel like if I did do those drugs or I was around somebody that was affected heavily by that, my opinion might change.
Uh-huh.
But initially
So
now, I kind of feel like I don't know, if you're a functioning drug addict or whatever, I I
that's
don't.
terrible for me. I mean, I hate that idea. I also hate the idea of like when people are arguing for marijuana legalization, they'll say, "Oh, but look at all the money revenue that's going to come in," and I'm grossed out by the idea that I would be benefiting from people doing drugs, using their money improperly to buy drugs that do not.
No, I think it's mainly it's aimed at the Republicans and everything that are against marijuana use, and they're trying to like argue from that fiscally,
Yeah, but once you've
argument.
conceded that, the rest of your argument against free market, I mean, it compromises the argument in other places. If you were if yeah, so in that case, like in the case of marijuana legalization, once you've started saying, "Oh, but the economy would be better if this was legalized" or whatever, then the person could come in and use that same argument. You can't have it both ways in different areas. So yeah, I'm against the idea of, for example, public schools being partially funded by drug use is is problematic for me because it's like blood diamonds and all of that. It's blood money. I don't
Yeah,
want to.
yeah, but nobody's getting hurt in the production and
Society is being hurt by people. Uh, okay, so um, there are people who are physically capable of doing good things for society and helping us move forward. They are capable of having a good job and being productive. They're capable of getting a good education, but instead they would be doing drugs. And I think that's the problem. It's morally good to work hard at work, and and I would I'm close to saying that it's morally bad for a person to consume substances like marijuana and other drugs.
okay. So how do you reconcile alcohol?
I'm a Yeah, that would be included on my list.
Okay, see, because I'm more.
I like prohibition. I wish they had enforced it better. Now with cameras, 24/7 surveillance, I think it would be possible finally.
Yeah, no, definitely against that. See, I'm more for eliminating the incentive versus the moral argument, and I think that I don't necessarily see your.
What happens if a lot of people if you what happens if the government says, okay, Whatever you do in your own time, that's up to you. And then a large number of people go and do hard drugs. And they try it one time and get addicted. Could you imagine what would happen if everyone in the country tried it just a little bit,
Okay, okay.
and then a
The,
certain percentage would be addicted from that point on?
okay, I've seen a compelling argument kind of against that, where the statistics they were using were talking about Vietnam veterans, and they were saying that there was widespread drug use during Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And the surveys or Pew Research, whatever it was they had, it was like over 60% of the soldiers that were over in Vietnam did use heroin or hard drugs or something like that. They were definitely using while they were over there. But once they came back, only like 5% of them maintained that drug use, or eventually became like hard drug addicts once they came back to the United States. And the argument that they were kind of making was that it's not a strictly chemical issue. It's also a social issue. That the veterans that came back that didn't have family and friends and social interactions and stuff like that got worse with their drug addiction. But the veterans that came back and had families and friends and kept up all of those interactions, they quit using those hard drugs and everything because they had moral obligations and responsibilities and all of these interactions to get those kind of, to kind of validate them as a person, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, the ones that didn't have that delve deeper into it. So
you're basically making the argument that it's possible to rehabilitate people. There are ways to rehabilitate the people who become addicts.
Well, it's more along the lines of like addiction is not 100% a chemical issue. I think that, but I don't think it's 100% a social issue either. I think that it's somewhere in between, and I think that there are some people that are more predispositioned to addiction, and there's some people that once they try, some kind of prescription drugs, like some people are just they're hooked and they cannot, and that's because of the chemical interactions in their body are different than the next guy. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's somewhere in between, but I don't think if you made heroin legal that everybody would go out and just start doing heroin and everything, and then you have a country full of addicts. I think that it would be a problem, and you would have more addicts than you do now because it's widely available, but I don't think the country would cease to function overnight.
Okay. So we have a certain number of addicts right now, addicts and drug users who are not necessarily addicts.
Yeah.
If we make it legal and more people do those drugs, would that be better in your view? Because you're saying, well, that equals more freedom, therefore better. I would basically see that as a negative. Once I want as many people as possible to be productive, and the idea, and one of the things that the liberals are saying, because I disagree on this with them on this issue, because I actually went through the DARE program in elementary school and actually believed what the police officers were telling me back then. Okay, so anyway, one of the things that they're saying is that let's legalize all drugs, not just marijuana. They want to legalize everything. Okay,
yeah.
And then we'll just have the government step in and help treat people with addiction. And it's like, I don't want more people. I don't want to necessarily be rehabilitating people who can then just go back out and then do drugs again because it's still legal. I don't want. Yeah. And
at the same time, I currently work at a pharmaceutical place and everything, and we still get drug tested, even if in the state of same thing in Colorado. If you work at a place that has any sort of controlled substances in their that they work with, mm-hmm. then you still get drug tested. So it's like, okay, yeah, you could make it 100% legal, and then anybody can do what they want, but
the companies would be the check on that because they wouldn't want.
Exactly. So, and at the same time, I'm for you being able to do whatever you want on the weekend, but I'm not for showing up to work drunk and high, and I do want you to stay productive, but I think that you have a Saturday and a Sunday, you want to shoot up. I mean, whatever. I mean, you do whatever you want to do, but at the same time, if that conflicts with your obligations or your responsibilities, then it's a problem. But
All right. So if you, how long would that stay in your system? Like if you're doing drugs on the weekend, and then your company is drug testing you on weekdays, how would you necessarily be caught? Or
yeah, I think it's a yeah, because they do like the little hair samples and everything, and
uh-huh.
I think like a urine test, you can kind of flush out your system a little bit better, I guess, if you drink like a ton of liquids and just constantly like,
Wow,
try to
you're
flush it out
very
and everything.
knowledgeable about this stuff. Wow.
I think I've never actually tried to like, like, oh no, I smoked and I need to, try to pass this or anything like that. That's never happened to me, but I've heard of other people and they have like certain pills for it or detox pills.
Uh-huh.
It's yeah that you can order on Amazon and shit. It's weird, but yeah, I think that like I want to say for those harder drugs, like I imagine they stay in your system longer, but I think that like a urine test is almost fallible. But I think the hair test stays in your, I don't know, there's traces of it or something like that, that like as your hair grows, like little parts of those compounds are in the hair as it comes out, I think. So they cut off
Okay.
a piece and they can test how far back. But
Yeah. So anyway, I'm still. Yeah,
yeah,
I would like drugs to be illegal. Yeah. So I still think that that would be the best kind of system for maximum prosperity, human prosperity in the future. You know.
see, yeah, and I would disagree just because I think that it's like, I know this is anecdotal and everything, but like when you tell a kid not to do something, now the kid wants to do it. Or I mean,
But
it's not
in
in
my
every case.
system,
It's not like
I mean, once you've decided that something is morally bad, you are obligated to discourage that action to some degree. Okay, so
yeah,
you can't use that
it,
as a.
it doesn't work for everything and everything. But I think that like mainly with alcohol and everything, like growing up, I know there are some parents that are like they'll tell their kids like, okay, yeah, you can drink as long as you're here. You can't go out like if you drink around us and everything, like that's okay. And I think that gets rid of the allure and the mystery of it and everything, and it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, I know, I don't know, this is what it is, and it doesn't make it nearly as enticing and everything. But again, my main thing is like, why fight the incentive when you can either use it to your
The
advantage or kind of
financial incentive. Why fight the financial incentive, right?
yeah, why fight
I
why
mean,
fight the financial incentive?
it's like when I was a kid, and I was told not to do something, I presumed, there was a good reason to not do that thing. Okay,
Yeah,
like when I was a kid, I was told not to cuss, not to use bad words, and I didn't do it. Okay,
yeah.
I was told not to do drugs. I didn't do. I don't know where. I don't know how other people are. Yeah. Anyway, all right. So that's, I suppose we've covered enough for today. All right. So
We didn't even get into the self censorship stuff.
self censorship. What kind of?
All about the N word and
Oh yeah, yeah.
that's what I really wanted to get into because
Okay. Well, I still have time. I still have like
okay, okay.
another hour free. We could still talk about that.
Okay, yeah,
Um.
'cause I'm really intrigued about that because I think that because I remember we had a debate a long time ago about you talking about like uh, basically like you can't scientifically prove somebody is offended or
Mhm.
anything like that. So I'm really surprised that you take the viewpoint that like offensive language is morally bad and that like Sargon's video where he's using a bunch of slurs and a bunch of other offensive language and everything in response to a video that's trying to kind of like tell you that no, that using these words are wrong and everything, and he's using them in defiance. I'm surprised that you take the video's argument on it, or not. Maybe you don't take the argument of it, but you take that side that there's no reason to say these words. And I'm much more in line with the free speech up until calls to violence. I think that you should be able to say whatever you want. There shouldn't nothing you should say or whatever is I don't know. It should be punishable, basically. I agree could be debatable and you can talk about whatever, but I think that like somebody using the N word even in a I don't know in any sort of manner, I don't think that
Okay, so the way I'm seeing it is that
yeah
um, there's a distinction between there's a use mentioned distinction, right?
yeah
That's what they call it officially. But it's like if you say if you simply mention the word, if you simply utter the word, like you're quoting what someone else said, then that would be one thing. The other situation, in contrast to that, is when you're calling someone slurs. Okay, and so basically, uh, I would say that I want everyone to learn about the use mentioned distinction and apply it so that we can, because it meshes with the whole no no double standards rule of logical debate.
okay
Okay, so before, let me see. So some years ago, what I basically agreed with the whole. All right, let me go into some background. So I
okay
grew up I grew up believing that we were a post-racial society.
mhm.
I was surprised to learn about slavery, and I thought, of course, color doesn't matter. Who cares about why would people think that matters? I saw my mother accusing people of being racists left and right, and I thought, oh, she's from an older generation. She's still paranoid, and so I'm just not going to take anything that she says seriously. Uh, that's just how she grew up, and she can't change her habits. Uh, so yeah, I did not grow up to be like my mother. I thought, my teachers were correct on this issue, and we're past it, okay. And that the things that you see on TV and in movies, those are characters where people are. It's just for fun, They're
yeah yeah
claiming that people are racist and all that. It's just for the fun of it, right? And one thing that I did believe at that time though was that uh, when it comes to the N word, I thought that anyone could say the word, they could mention it, as long as you're not calling people that. Then that's when the line would be crossed. And I thought, there's only a few people who would actually call people slurs like that. Okay, so
yeah
it serves like a good marker. So I thought everyone basically agreed with that. Uh, And then I found out that actually, once I moved here to Florida, I discovered that they don't the newscasters they said the N word, and for the first time I realized I mean I didn't know that's the first time I heard of it. I was like, what's they were reporting on the story once I came at the very beginning once I first got into Florida. They were reporting on the story where a teacher used the N word in a letter to one of her students, and I was like, what's the N word? So I stayed and I watched the rest of the story to find out, and then I realized that what they were talking about, and I had never heard of that term. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't watching the right TV shows or something. I didn't have cable for a while up until then. So anyway, uh, yeah. So that's the first time I realized that people were avoiding even mentioning the word. Okay, and so I was surprised by that. That apparently white people are not even allowed to mention the word. Okay, so that surprised me, and I thought that that's silly. All right,
mhm.
and and then let me see. I realized, I still think that that's a silly position. But I've come to, at some point, I came to understand the worry about it. And then a few years ago at work, you know, one of the guys who came to work with us, uh, he, in a fit of rage at Obama, called him the N word in the presence of one of my other friends, and and so I confronted him about it. I asked him, "Did you really call Obama that?" And he said, "Yeah, but it was just because I was angry." And by the way, back up north, I have a black friend who told me that I can use the N word.
You got to pass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was like, holy crap. Okay, so there's some black guy up north who told him that it's okay for him to use the
Uh,
racial slurs, and and that black guy is probably where I used to be, but he doesn't realize that this white guy here is actually calling people that instead of merely mentioning it, you know.
yeah.
And so then I realized that there's a danger in where um, people are not educated on the use mention distinction. So they're saying that it's okay to say it, right? It should be okay to say it, and they mistake that for saying it's okay to call people that. Um,
Is it morally bad to use that word?
it depends on what you mean by the word use. Do you mean to mention or to uh, use it as a
To
derogatory?
use it. To use it, not to just say the actual word, but yeah, to use it in the its original
Wait a minute now.
context.
Original. Wait a minute now. When you say the word original, I immediately think about the dictionary definition because I had another coworker who was telling me, "Oh my goodness, this is a separate." Oh, let's get into it. This is the time for it, I suppose. Okay,
Yeah,
so
so what's the dictionary?
the
Uh,
dictionary definition, according to the guy that this other guy. So what happened was, I had another coworker who, this was back when we could bring our music in to work with us. He was listening to rap music and singing along to it, right? And I thought, I think I want to remove myself from the situation before I hear something I don't want to hear. Uh, but yeah, so he was telling he was he was using that word in the same way that black people use it in jest. You know. Yeah, I overheard him using that word in a friendly kind of
yeah, yeah.
manner. Okay,
Okay.
as if he's one of the guys. And and I told him at some point that I felt uncomfortable about that. Okay, now he took that badly, and eventually we talked about it some more, and he started telling me about what it was like up north, where he was his hometown, where he was like, okay, so I saw. He said that he was walking down the street, and he saw a group of black people on the other side, with their pants hanging down, wearing baggy clothing and all of that. What am I supposed to call them? That's what he asked me. Is it okay for me to call them that? You know, and I'm like, oh my goodness, you shouldn't be calling them anything. I mean, basically, my position is, name calling in itself is a problematic. But yeah, so in his view, he was like, well, if they're wearing baggy clothing, then it's okay to call them that.
Yeah, this sounds like a vocabulary problem. Like he just needs more, you know, more options, I guess.
Yeah, and then he said, you shouldn't. Yeah, I was trying to tell him, you shouldn't be calling anyone anything, especially not just because they're. Anyway, and then he
Yeah,
said that, the dictionary definition just means an ignorant person, and so it's okay for me to call them that because they're being ignorant. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Dictionary definition? That's ridiculous. But I looked it up, and indeed, it, it
it,
does say ignorant person or something. You could, yeah. So yeah,
with no explanation behind the racial
there's
connotations.
also
Everything.
that's the second definition. So
Oh,
it'll
okay,
give you
okay,
both. Okay, and
okay.
so it's like there's no way that black people are just going to allow. No, no. This its meaning has changed. That other meaning is archaic. No, so
Yeah.
that's
Okay, okay.
um
So,
yeah.
yeah, to
So
get
so in
back on
other
track.
words,
So, yeah, is it morally bad to say or to use the word
in
in
a
the?
derogatory manner,
Yes,
to call people that. That's where I have
yes.
a problem. That's where I would draw the line.
Mm.
Uh, Although I'm not necessarily claiming that it is morally bad for a person to use it derogatorily. Uh, yeah, so basically, my view is that we should teach people about the use mention distinction, and you have to also understand that some people are going to have a hard time learning it,
Mhm.
right? So there are going to be people who fail to do it correctly. Now, when they fail, they you should expect them to be criticized for that because there are people who believe it's morally bad to use it
Mhm.
uh, as an insult. There are people who feel it is morally bad to use slurs as an insult. Oh my goodness! And then there was a separate white guy who came to work, and he started calling my coworkers. He said, he said, "Man, there's a lot of beaners here," and I was like, "What the heck is that?" I had never heard of beaner before, and sure
Beaners.
enough, my goodness, it's amazing how many freaking slurs are there. It's crazy. So So yeah, it seems like I'm suddenly learning. There's a lot of white people who like the idea of using slurs as insults. You see, so I'm just becoming aware of this pattern, and it's creepy. Okay, and so then you have to think like, okay, if we try to teach people the use mention distinction, and we say, okay, it's okay for you to read aloud this word in this context, but it's not okay here. Will they stick with that? Will they learn it correctly, or will they make more mistakes and then just creep everyone out?
Okay. I guess the issue I have with it is when you get into how you enforce that. I think that I think everybody can agree that using a racial slur as in a derogatory manner, I mean, it's using any sort of insult really is morally bad. Uh, but I think that when you get down to enforcing it and saying that somebody using this term automatically makes it a hate crime, and I don't know, and then I don't know,
Hate crime
mix.
has a separate meaning. There's a legal meaning for that. I don't want to deal with. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
there are people who react inappropriately. Okay, now we can talk about what should count as an appropriate type of a criticism when someone does use it as an insult. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Now, when you're talking about SJWs overreacting, you could respond to them by using logical debate, the way I've already laid out, where you make them define their own words, and you stipulate that it must be a scientifically okay. So rule one is that you must debate logically, which means each person needs to be trying to change the other person's mind using logic,
Yep.
which means no threats of violence, no violence, no threats of violence. You can only
Agreed.
use logic. Rule two is that you need to maintain that your views are logical until you change your mind, and change your mind only for logical reasons. Rule three is limit debate to scientifically provable human actions or facts. Okay. Rule four is when you're going into the realm of moral debates, you need to start by agreeing, making sure the other person agrees that it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. And then rule five is basically to word all of your other moral views in that same template. It is morally blank to do blank, right? And so that force it's morally bad for a person to do some action. That prevents double standards from creeping into the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so so basically, if you follow those rules, you can fight back against the SJWs, the people who are overreacting in these
Yeah. Yeah.
situations, getting them to define what exactly counts as a hate crime and is it scientifically provable.
Mhm.
And like I would say that it's not possible to scientifically prove that a person is acting like a racist using the normal definition of to act like a racist because it's mental. It's a mental action using that normal definition. But you can scientifically prove that a person used a word as an insult in a certain context or whatever. Okay, so that's what I would say.
So okay, I think that I think that all I don't know.
And then we can have a discussion about what should count as criticism, the correct amount of criticism for a person who does a morally bad action. Now, if I disagree with you on the morality of an action like to do drugs, to do illegal drugs. If I say that it's morally bad for a person to do that, you can't. You can argue that actually, Chris, it's not morally bad. You could say that to me, but when I'm going and I'm basically obligated to criticize that person who I see doing that morally bad action. Okay, so for you to criticize me for criticizing that person, it's basically like you're discouraging me from criticizing the person. But if I don't criticize them, I'm acting hypocritically.
Okay. I would. Okay. If you want to go back to, see, I feel like that there just needs to be another distinction there in the drug argument and everything. If I saw somebody doing drugs when they should be at work, or they have some sort of other responsibility or obligation, I would 100% agree with you. That is a morally bad action. But if they are doing it out of their own free time, they, have the entire day to themselves, and they want to do this, I think the inherent action of doing a drug or any sort of chemical substance or whatever, as long as you know that you're going to function tomorrow or whatever, you're going to meet all of your moral obligations, I do not care. I do not care what you do, what time.
Yeah. So, but the discussion now is what counts as the appropriate amount of criticism. Okay, so once you've decided that it's morally bad for a person to do drugs when they have other obligations.
Yeah.
All right. Me and you might disagree on what counts as criticism of that action. Not like you must criticize that action to some degree, but then we're going to disagree on what the appropriate degree is.
So
Okay.
what do you mean? Like give me an example of what would be an inappropriate amount of criticism.
To call for that person to be fired.
Okay. So the punishment.
That would be like.
Okay.
So it's like when a person, like if a person is using a racial slur and they use it as an insult, and that person is like, there are going to be people who going to be people who say that that action was morally bad, and for them that counts as discouragement enough, criticism enough. And then there are going to be other people who believe that the action was morally bad, and that person, they're going to call for that person to be fired.
Okay.
And so
see, I would say that I would say that an insult's an insult, and if you're going to like name calling in general, I feel like should be treated the same. If you're going to call somebody a hurtful racial slur, it should be the same as if you call somebody an asshole. Like that, I feel like the punishment should all be the same there. I don't think that it should be that much more, because I really do feel like the more taboo you place on these words, the more power those words have, and they will always have that taboo power. But the second you say, you know what, anybody can say this and no one's going to care, I like less people will either say it or it's just no longer an issue.
Okay. So let me disagree with you. Okay. So you're basically saying that all insults are equally. If you're going to claim that an insult is morally bad, you have to claim the same for all insults.
I don't want to commit. I don't want to.
You're considering that position.
Yeah, I'm considering that. I'm more. I'm leaning more towards like name calling is name calling. Like if you call somebody an asshole, if you call somebody the N-word, whatever, I feel like that should all be treated the same. And in that case, I would say like, I would agree that all insults are morally bad, but they do happen, and I don't think that there should necessarily be, I don't know. I haven't fully fleshed this.
Okay, so basically, I disagree with you, and I would say that if there is a person who believes that there is a hierarchy of insults, of name calling, okay, if a person says that this category of words is morally worse than another category of words, and they say that different levels of criticism and punishment are appropriate for those different levels, you who disagree and think that they are all on the same level, you could argue that actually, You should argue that all insult, all name calling should be on the same level, and you could have that kind of debate. But if you, I want you to, are you do you realize that this kind of debate would be separate from the government force necessarily? It's not necessarily an issue of the government doing things. If I'm calling for someone to be fired for using certain language, that's still free market. In fact, that's boycotts are all part of the free market. That's what you should agree. You should be okay with that, right? You should be okay with someone having. In other words, you're going to have to, in order to criticize someone who places different insults on different levels, you're going to have to officially state on the record that it is morally bad for a person to criticize someone for using one set of name calling against as opposed to another. You have to state an official moral view like that. You understand?
Not exactly. So you're saying that I would have to state
On the record,
that
it is.
I don't know that it is equal as far as name calling in general, or
You would have to, in order for you to criticize, whenever you criticize someone, you are implying that they did something morally bad. So you need to articulate what that morally bad action was.
okay. So it's morally bad to place this set of name calling higher or more offensive than this other set. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so once you've stated that on the record, then yeah, maybe you could get into a debate about that. Okay, but that's how you would have to argue it. Now, for me, I think that there is a hierarchy. I lean towards that. Yeah, it's always been. Yeah. So I'm surprised that you would say that. We should. You're okay with normalizing. You're okay if slurs become normalized. How, and yet you believe that would lead to colorblindness, or do you not care about colorblindness? You also said that the free market, you're in favor of the free market taking care of all. Like if people want to discriminate, well, that's their, they should be free enough to discriminate in their hiring practices.
Okay. So I think in the case of
My fear is that if you allow that, if you don't have such taboos, if you don't have racial slurs at a different hierarchy, then the world would be worse.
See, again, I think this comes back to the that incentive. It's not a financial incentive, but I think that people are going to say things.
Not necessarily. No.
No, but okay, I'm 100%. I think it's morally bad to police words, regardless of violence or something like that. See, that's what I'm against, and I think that it really gets into okay. I see the argument you're trying to make where it's leading towards colorblindness, and by using those racial slurs, you are perpetuating those identities and allowing those to happen. Whereas that's counterintuitive to the colorblindness goal. But anytime that you say that this is an unmentionable word, you cannot use this word.
Wait a minute. Let's distinguish. Let's keep that that distinction there.
Okay. What distinction?
I'm not claiming that. I'm not going to be claiming that it's morally bad for a person to mention racial slurs. I'm going to claim that it's morally bad to use them as insults. And so you're against even that position for some reason. So go ahead and explain why.
Because I feel that it should just be on the same level of name calling. I think that there shouldn't be a hierarchy of insults and everything. I really think that it should be all treated the same. If you go and you call your boss an asshole or something like that, or whatever, that should be treated the same as if you called them any other name. You are doing an insult, and that's what it is at its core, is you are insulting somebody. and that should be treated accordingly. And I think that by making, I don't know, just anything that's sort of like trying to force people to stop using a certain word, I feel like people are just going to use it out of spite.
Trying to discourage people.
Yeah, if you try to discourage people to not use that word, people will use it out of spite.
That does not discount. If once you've declared that some action is morally bad, you are obligated to declare, to criticize a person who does it to some degree. Okay, so once I've decided that slurs are on a different level of name calling, using slurs as insults is on a different level as using other words as insults. Once I've declared that, it makes perfect sense for me to treat those insults differently. Okay, I'm surprised that you would want there to be no hierarchy of insults, because right now there is one. Okay, and that you're saying, when you're talking about incentives, so there's an incentive against using racial slurs. And to the degree that that works, it stops people from using slurs. And so you're saying, well, let's get rid of that negative stigma. Let's get rid of that and make all insults equal. Wouldn't that result in more people using slurs as insults? And then wouldn't that lead to the world being a worse place? Or are you saying that the good that would come would be, I don't know, more freedom
No,
to say?
No, I'm not. It's not so much that I'm advocating for the use of the words. So I'm not trying to get rid of the hierarchy just so that way more people can use them. I want to get rid of the hierarchy because I feel like the more taboo you put on something, the more power it has. And I feel like it's just a word. It's literally a word. It's not I'm not hurling some sort of like physical thing that is going to harm.
No contradiction. Okay, so I think that the difference we have is you're saying that a word has more power the more you declare that it's morally worse than other words. Right?
Exactly, and if you remove that taboo, then no one would get offended by.
It's not possible. It's not possible to scientifically prove that a person is offended. Okay, so restate that. They wouldn't claim to be offended.
Okay, so your argument is in no way related to things being offensive or anything like that. You are just saying there should be more of a negative stigma or a disincentivize people using these words, so that way we can reach a colorblind society.
Right.
That is.
I mean, that's basically, yeah.
Yeah, and I see nothing wrong with that, but I think that by giving it a taboo, that gives it more power, and then it will always kind of. I think people will use it in jest. People will use it anonymously. Again, you could go back to your 24-hour surveillance thing, and then yes, nobody would use it, but that's not logistically viable now.
It is. Okay, and we can make it viable. Okay, and when it comes to jest, I don't believe that it's possible to scientifically prove that a person is joking. What I'm planning is to say that if you're going to tell a joke, you need to declare your joke beforehand in advance.
See, that I disagree as well. Just because, half of the reason some jokes are funny is because they're so unexpected. If you say this is a joke, then it's not funny. It's just you ruin the
There are
joke.
things more important than laughing. Okay, and there are times when there are gray areas in the world, specifically because one person says a joke that the other person didn't realize was a joke, or one person does something and says something.
Wait. Yeah, before we get into all the
claims
stuff,
that they're joking afterwards.
Okay, before we get into all the joke stuff and everything, I do want to well, did we completely, kind of flesh out our views and everything beforehand before we get into the joke section of it? As far as you have defined that everybody should understand the use mention. You believe that there should be this hierarchy, and you should disincentivize that to achieve.
Wait a minute. Now, you're using should a lot. I did not claim any additional moral views on the record, though. Okay? So I'm saying that it's morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. It's morally good for a person to work hard at work, and nothing comes after that. Okay. Now I'm just discussing the possible views that I
Okay, okay,
could
okay.
be coming to. I'm the ones that I would consider putting on the
Okay,
record.
okay, that's fair. So yeah, these are all your considered
Yes.
point of views. Okay. Um, but that basically covers it. Is you're not so okay, yeah. So that makes a lot more sense because initially, like, I knew that going into this, like, you do not care about if somebody's offended or not. So for me, I was
Because it's not
like,
scientifically provable.
agreed,
Black
agreed,
Lives
and
Matter. When it comes to that, just for the record, I do not believe it's possible to scientifically prove that something matters. You have to flesh out exactly what that verb means and if it's scientifically provable or not. Okay, go ahead.
I guess we can get into that later. I guess, but yeah, because
When you when
I
you
knew that.
yeah, the thing I noticed about what you were saying is that you went back to saying that if a word if there is a different hierarchy for different types of insults, then that will give more power to the word. And when you use that, you're using it as shorthand for SJWs will overreact to it. All right. So what I would say to solve your problem of people overreacting to insults is to, debate them by saying, if you believe a person could agree. Like if you were to change your mind, you could hold this position. You could say, okay, I believe it is morally bad for a person to use a slur as an insult. I believe that using a slur a racial slur as an insult is morally worse than other kinds of insults. But you SJWs are taking the criticism too far. You're punishing the people too much. It's out of proportion. You can make the argument that they're doing
Okay,
it out of proportion, and you could hold that position. And yeah, so you don't have to say, you don't have to go to the point of all insults should be on the same level, so that there's no power in it. You just criticize the people who are taking it out of proportion. That's all you have to do.
okay, yeah, okay. But all right. So yeah, and then I guess getting into the joke section or territory, you believe it's not scientifically provable to determine if someone is joking or whatever, and you're considering taking the position of someone should give a disclaimer before they're about to give a joke.
Something like that. Yeah, I'm considering even putting it into the rules of the debate. When you're debating with someone about logic, you must state things that are true, views that you actually hold. And so for you to say something and then, realize it's bad afterwards and then say, oh, I was just joking there.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's
I agree that there's that gray area, and that's a problem. But I don't think that you know, I don't think a disclaimer is the answer. Um, I don't know what exactly would be the answer and everything. I feel like with most jokes, I don't know. Like
yeah, it's the way I see
I
it.
feel like those gray areas are so few and far between that most of the time you can tell when somebody's joking. I would say most
Make
of
it
the
a
time, you can
science.
tell, huh?
Make
Make it a
it
sign.
into a science. Okay, that's my suggestion for you then. Okay, because I'm going to hold the view for now that it is not possible to scientifically prove that a person is joking.
I
You
mean, maybe
can
you
prove you can prove that a person declared that they're going to tell a joke beforehand. Okay, but
see.
I don't necessarily count the declaration afterwards as actually proof
See, I
that they
mean,
were.
maybe you could have some sort of like in a serious debate setting. It could be you could make it to where like okay, everything that is said is going to be on the record, and so this is going to be transcribed and everything, and you have it to where this will be transcribed, and later on people can read this, and that they're going to read it exactly as it is said or as it is written. So if you make a joke or something like that, that may not translate as well.
Right.
So then you basically disincentivize jokes in that serious debate setting. I think that, and that way you're in a situation to where people are not going to be joking here. You're going to be going back and forth with serious ideas and everything. And if somebody starts getting into joking territory, they're on the record with those jokes. But it would only have to be in serious kind of debate settings. And I feel like because yeah, I I don't like the idea of kind of like outlawing jokes in that
Don't.
setting.
That's a straw man. Reword that.
Yeah. It's and that's the extreme case of it, and that's what that's the slippery slope way too far down the line, and that's what I feel like it's leading towards, and
Stop.
that's what I don't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Just don't do that. Make the stronger. Make the argument I'm making, and then argue against my actual position.
Okay.
You think that my position would lead to what exactly? Where I'm saying everyone should declare their jokes ahead of time. Where I'm considering putting that in my rules of logical debate.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a logical reason
Now,
outside of you ruin the joke. Like that's my biggest problem with it right now. But uh,
yeah, if you still want to be able to it's like this, okay? Um, for the people who want to claim that they're joking about saying racially insensitive things, what I'm saying is that if you want to do that, I'm going to make the position. I'm going to hold the position that it's not possible to scientifically prove a person is joking, and then everyone's going to have to start declaring their jokes ahead of time. Okay. Now, if you don't like that, then those people over there, they're going to need to stop trying to tell those kinds of jokes or claiming that they were joking. Okay. So it's like, okay, so either you guys are going to back off of that whole that thing that they're doing, or
I mean,
I'm gonna
okay, like who is doing that though? I feel like this is such a like a non-issue.
the alt right. I'm thinking of the alt right, the people who use the Pepe the Frog thing and claim, oh, this is we're joking, ha 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 ha. Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like that's more like Richard Spencer using the Nazi salute in jest.
Uh huh.
Uh, so so yeah, I really
How are you going to argue against them?
because what they're advocating for is not they're not advocating for the eradication of other races, but I do think that they're constantly getting labeled as Nazis and everything
Okay,
else,
yeah,
and
that's straw man. Okay, you can argue that's out of proportion. You have to call
yeah,
people exactly the label that they want, that they feel best with. Identitarian. That's what Richard Spencer says. White identitarian, white nationalist. Yeah, to be you have to be exceedingly precise with all of your labels of people. Okay, and so that adds to the complication of the debate, and it adds to the effort that you need to put into it. Okay, and so would stipulating that all jokes need to be preceded by an announcement. Jokes start, "Hey, you're an idiot." Joke end. Okay, so it's possible to scientifically prove that I was joking, or at least I claimed that I was joking there. All right. So yeah, I think that's basically where I'm going to be. That's where I'm going to be going. It's also like with logical debate. I'm gonna say, okay, starting now, we're gonna start logical debate, and this is on the record, and the logical debate doesn't end until we say logical debate ends, and then in between those areas, you can't threaten violence, for example,
Mhm.
and yeah, so I'm basically thinking of formalizing it in that way so that you have to precede logical debates with that kind of announcement and precede jokes with that kind of announcement in the span of the debate. So that at least during actual logical debates, there will be no joking unless it's, you know, I think that would be good. Uh, and so, yeah, the world might be less funny. But hey, we're going to gain more people being more colorblind, and they're going to be better educated. They're going to have to come up with stronger arguments, no more name calling without being super specific. You know, it's all positives from there.
I mean, okay, in a logical debate setting, yeah, okay. But I think that yeah. Outside of that, yeah, okay. So I'll
All right, and
I'm
yeah, so
gonna
you
think
should,
harder on it. Though. I'm gonna think harder on it, and then if
yeah,
I
yeah.
I'm gonna
So
Let's see if I can come up with
All right.
something
So
to.
and you need to think about how can you scientifically prove a person is joking based on their
Yeah,
tone of voice and the context. Okay. So you have to start thinking about the details of that science. You need to turn it into a science and then get back with me. All right.
yeah, yeah. I feel like
Because otherwise, I don't see how you're going to argue against Spencer, and how are you going to argue against the alt right, the people who are doing those jokes? Are you going to claim that it's just a small number of people? Let's remove all anti-discrimination laws and have the free market. What are those alt right people going to go and do? I mean, they're already, you know, yeah, yeah.
see, I would say that you can no, but in the alt right's case, you could logically debate them and point out that like, hey, you're just doing what they're doing, but you're doing it about white people, and it's still like it's morally bad in both cases. So they would lose the argument. The black supremacists and everything would lose the argument, and everybody in between that is, that has those sort of viewpoints. So I feel like it'll crumble on its own.
Yeah, you have more faith in it than I do. Because right now there are anti-discrimination laws. In the current situation, those laws exist, okay, and that's useful
Yeah,
because, like, if someone in the alt-right, if they declare that they are going to discriminate, or if they, use racial slurs as
yeah,
insults, then that could be used as scientific evidence that, or, yeah, for the time being, I'm not against anti-discrimination laws. It's just a matter of how are you gonna, what counts as scientific evidence that the law was broken.
yeah. And I'm not necessarily against that either. I still have to define exactly where I'm at as far as like
Okay.
you should be able to hire whoever you want and everything. But at the same time, I do see if you're specifically hiring based on race, I'm just gonna say like no, I'm against that.
Yeah,
If that's your sole only reason for hiring these individuals and everything is because they're of a certain race, I would say I'm against that, and that shouldn't be right. It should all be based on merit.
uh-huh.
Um,
All right,
but yeah, so I would agree with you more on that.
all right, all right. So that's enough for today then. Okay.
Yeah. All right.